Hi. You're watching Reddit Confessions. Grab a drink, this story might hit places you didn't expect. I think I actually laughed when I saw it. Like, a short, bitter exhale, the kind of laugh that happens right before you mentally check out. Because how else do you react when you walk into a room full of clinking glasses and hollow compliments, and see your wife, the same woman who told you she'd be networking tonight, casually sitting on her boss's lap like it's her assigned seat? Let me back up. No, scratch that. I won't back up. You don't need context. You just need to understand this. I didn't walk into that party as a man, I walked in as an afterthought. I was only invited because she forgot to lie fast enough. Her words, if you really want to come. I guess that's okay. Which already felt like I was intruding on her second life. The house wasn't a house. It was a statement, all black marble, indoor waterfalls, and a garage with cars that cost more than our mortgage. The kind of place where people say things like, let's circle back, in casual conversation. And I was trying, God, I was trying, to blend in. I stood there with a sweating glass of something I couldn't pronounce, pretending not to notice I was alone again. I didn't see her at first. I saw him. Quentin Merrick. Her boss. The man whose name had come up way too often in recent months. I once joked that she admired him a little too much. She didn't laugh. He sat there on a low designer couch, legs spread like he owned the air. People orbited him like satellites, until she landed right in the center. On his lap. I don't remember walking toward them. I just remember people slowly noticing me, like a strange echo arriving late to a conversation. He had one hand loosely holding a drink. The other rested on her side. She leaned into him with the ease of habit. She whispered something, and he smirked. I felt like I was watching a scene from a show I didn't subscribe to. Someone said my name. I didn't answer. Melissa saw me and froze for a heartbeat, not out of guilt, but out of inconvenience. Like I'd interrupted a private joke. I didn't shout. Didn't ask her what the hell she was doing. I just stood there and observed. I let it burn. Then, softly, I said, you might want to get up. Quentin raised his eyebrows, amused. We're just talking, he said. Are you? I asked. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. I just pulled my phone from my coat pocket, unlocked it, and held up the screen. A video played. A familiar voice. Melissa's voice. From his office. Recorded a week ago. Let's just keep this between us. He's too soft to handle the truth. There were gasps, real ones this time. Quentin stood up so fast Melissa nearly fell off his lap. I looked at her, and she looked everywhere but me. I didn't walk away, I told them. I just made sure you remembered who I was, right before everything collapses. And that was only the first 5 minutes of that night. I didn't plan it. That's the saddest part. I never set out to humiliate her. I just wanted the truth to mean something for once. But the moment the audio clip played and her voice floated across that pristine room, her words so casual, so dismissive, I realized I'd just torn the veil off the life I thought I had. And what was underneath was rotten. Quentin's confidence cracked first. His mouth twitched as if he was about to speak, then he caught the wide eyes around the room. He looked like a man who'd been slapped with a lawsuit mid-toast. Melissa was worse. Her eyes darted, scanning for exits, explanations, allies. None were there. She had walked into that party like she owned the room. Now she looked like a lost intern at her first interview. And me? I just stood there. Holding the phone like it weighed 100 pounds. My hand was shaking, and not from rage, from disbelief. I wasn't supposed to be this guy. The guy who records things. The guy who digs. The guy who loses his wife to a man with tailored socks and a custom ice machine. But there I was, proving that even the most passive husbands have their breaking point. The silence didn't last long. Quentin recovered just enough to straighten his posture and say, "Leland, let's not make this ugly. Let's talk in private." But I didn't want private. That was her world, everything hidden, everything whispered, everything, "Not now, babe. No. If they wanted to shatter things in public, then public is where I'd let it burn." "I'm not the one who made this ugly," I replied, louder than I meant to. "I'm just the idiot who finally started noticing the cracks." He glanced at the crowd, then at Melissa, then at me. And for a split second, he wasn't a boss or a host, he was just a man who knew the storm had started and didn't bring an umbrella. Melissa finally stepped forward. Her voice was uneven. "Can we please talk about this at home?" I looked at her. And read it, I don't know how to explain this, but her face. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't even regret. It was annoyance. Like I had ruined her night. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. "Sure," I said. "Let's go home. Let's talk. But just so you know, this isn't about forgiveness anymore. It's about honesty, which you seem to reserve for other men's offices." And I left. I actually left. I walked out the front door while half the room stared, and the other half pretended not to. No one said a word. Not one person stopped me. And that told me everything I needed to know about how long this had been going on. It wasn't shocking to them. It was routine. Back in the car, I didn't turn on the engine. I sat in the dark, the coastal wind rattling against the Jeep like it was trying to warn me about what was coming next. 5 minutes later, Melissa opened the door and slid into the passenger seat without saying anything. Not even a sigh. I started the car. She didn't look at me. Just stared straight ahead. And then, in the quietest voice I'd ever heard from her, she said, "You didn't have to embarrass me." That was the moment I realized we weren't going to fix anything. Because in her mind, the betrayal wasn't what she did. It was what I exposed. And I hadn't even told her the worst part yet. I had more than audio. I had a video. One she didn't know existed. And I hadn't decided whether I was going to use it. We drove home in silence, which is ironic considering how loud my thoughts were. Every mile, every red light, every glance at her reflection in the side window chipped away at what little was left of the version of her I had married. She didn't say a word. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. And I didn't ask questions, not because I didn't have them, but because I already knew the answers would be dressed in lies too lazy to be convincing. She thought it was over. She thought I'd had my outburst, embarrassed her in front of her polished colleagues, and now we'd both pretend it was a moment of weakness on my part. That I'd come home, stew in my guilt for making a scene, and maybe, if she rationed her apologies just right, I'd forgive her eventually. But I wasn't that version of me anymore. I was already halfway out the door emotionally. The rest was just logistics. The moment we stepped into the house, she kicked off her heels like nothing had happened. She poured herself a glass of wine. Didn't even ask if I wanted one. I watched her back as she leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone like this was any other Thursday night. It was infuriating, not the betrayal itself, but the normalcy she tried to wrap it in afterward. "Are you seriously not going to say anything?" I asked, not shouting, just, hollow. She sighed, sipped, and muttered, "What do you want me to say, Leland? You made your point. I get it. She gets it." Just like that. I wanted to tell her everything. That I'd been suspicious for weeks. That the late nights and muted phone calls hadn't gone unnoticed. That I'd borrowed my friend Milo's nanny cam, the one shaped like a wall plug, and placed it behind the bookshelf in our office weeks ago. Not because I expected to catch anything, but because I needed to know if I was losing my mind. I hadn't lost my mind. I had proof. I still remember the footage. It wasn't explicit, not in the graphic sense, again, this isn't that kind of story. But it was damning. It showed her laughing too softly in that same office. Quentin walking in. Her standing a little too close. The way she touched his arm and leaned forward as if she knew exactly where the blind spots were. Except she didn't. Not anymore. I didn't tell her about the video. Not yet. That's what she feared most, exposure. Not consequences. Not guilt. Just the loss of control. And I was going to let that fear grow. Let her think she had room to manipulate the situation. Let her twist and bend reality until she walked into a corner of her own making. But part of me still hoped, stupidly, that she'd confess on her own. So I sat at the dining table and asked quietly, "How long has it been going on?" She looked up from her glass, rolled her eyes like I was the problem. "There's nothing going on," she said. "You're making this bigger than it is." I nodded. Just once. And I think that was the exact second she lost me. Not because she cheated. But because she still thought I was dumb enough to believe her. I stood, walked past her, and opened the cabinet under the sink where we keep the router. I unplugged it without a word and headed toward the stairs. "Seriously?" she called after me. "What are you doing now?" I paused on the landing. Resetting everything. Wi-Fi. Passwords. Bank access. Email. "Don't worry, you'll understand soon." She laughed nervously. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said, looking her in the eye. "I'm just finally acting like someone who's been lied to long enough." And then I locked the bedroom door behind me, not because I was afraid of her, but because I didn't want to see the look on her face once she realized that I had already uploaded the video to a private folder named after the exact date she told me she was working late. She thought the damage was contained. It wasn't. The thing about silence is that it's rarely mutual. One person uses it as a weapon, the other as a shield. For the next 2 days, Melissa and I existed in the same space like ghosts. She clanged dishes louder than necessary in the kitchen. I answered emails with fake focus. We didn't sleep in the same room. Didn't eat at the same table. It was like living in a paused photograph. But the worst part? She still hadn't admitted anything. Not even a watered-down version of the truth. In her mind, the longer she avoided it, the less real it became. That's how she's always operated. When something cracks, pretend you don't hear the sound. When someone's bleeding, just don't look at the wound. Eventually, it goes away, right? But I wasn't going anywhere this time. And neither was what I knew. I didn't need revenge. I needed clarity. I needed to understand how someone you loved, someone who shared your bed, your home, your damn passwords, could sit in another man's lap and look relieved when you walked away. That wasn't a slip. That was freedom. Saturday morning came with fog and a headache. I hadn't slept much, and I hated that my body still expected coffee like everything was normal. I sat in the backyard, staring at our broken fence gate, wondering why we never got around to fixing it. It felt symbolic now, all the things we'd left crooked. She stepped outside eventually, arms folded like she was cold, even though it was August. I didn't look up. "I've been thinking," she said, and her voice was suddenly soft, like we were in the middle of a marriage counseling session that never happened. I said nothing. She went on, "I think we should take a break. Space. Just, to get some clarity." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Not because I was hurt. But because of how calculated she sounded. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to manage the fallout. "You want space now?" I asked, turning to face her. "After I caught you pretending someone else was your husband?" Her eyes narrowed. "It wasn't like that." I laughed. "Melissa, you were sitting on your boss's lap like he was your prom date. You humiliated me, she snapped, finally dropping the fake calm. Good, I said. Because I was humiliated long before that party. The difference is, mine was private. Yours deserved to echo. She turned and walked back inside, but not before I noticed her glance at the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept my spare phone. Her face didn't change, but her step sped up slightly. That was my answer. She knew. She knew I had something more than the audio. Something she hadn't accounted for. And now she was panicking. But quietly. Carefully. By that evening, she was back in performance mode. Cooked dinner. Wore makeup. Played music on her phone like she was hosting a dinner party for an invisible audience. I watched her set the table like a hostage staging her own rescue. And then, halfway through her glass of wine, she said something so casually I nearly dropped my fork. So, about your friend Milo. He works in IT, right? I froze. I hadn't mentioned Milo. Not since I borrowed that nanny cam from him. Yeah, I said slowly, placing my fork down. Why? She shrugged, too quickly. Just curious. You talk about him a lot. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. Let the weight of the silence fall between us again. That night, I backed up the video files to 2 cloud drives and 1 external hard drive. Labeled them with boring names no one would click, 2017 tax docs, and roof warranty PDFs. I also sent a copy to Milo. No context. Just the footage. He replied with one word, damn. The next morning, Melissa was gone. Not like she ran away, not yet, but like she needed to be somewhere that wasn't near me. Her toothbrush was still there. Her clothes. But her laptop. Her work phone. Gone. She had pulled the fire alarm and exited the building. And the worst part? She still thought I was too emotionally soft to chase the truth to the end. She still thought I'd crumble first. But I was done waiting for her to be honest. Now I was just waiting for the right moment to show her how little control she had left. Sunday started with the illusion of peace. I made eggs. Washed the dishes. Walked past her empty coffee mug like it still belonged in the story. The house had that strange kind of silence where everything looks normal until you realize it's not. I noticed her favorite cardigan was missing from the chair. Her perfume was gone from the dresser. But her wedding ring was still in the ceramic dish near the sink, the one we bought together at a flea market in Asheville on our 2nd anniversary. I stared at that ring like it was an artifact from a life I barely remembered. It was mocking in its stillness. Melissa always said rings are just symbols, but this one was screaming. By noon, I was pacing. She hadn't messaged. No, I need time. No, we'll talk later. Just gone. Like a temporary vanishing act, except now I was the one holding the spotlight and realizing the magician had taken the audience with her. That's when I remembered the laptop. Not the work one, she'd taken that, but the old one. The clunky silver MacBook that hadn't seen sunlight in nearly a year. She used to write blog drafts on it when she thought she wanted to be a lifestyle coach. It was buried in the hall closet behind blankets and boxes of tangled chargers. I pulled it out, powered it on, and to my surprise, it worked. No password. For someone so careful about what she showed the world, Melissa was oddly careless with what she stored. I didn't know what I was looking for. Just, anything. An anchor. A trail. A thread that could explain how a woman who once cried watching Pixar movies could so easily lie to the man who held her when her father passed away. I clicked through folders. Most were filled with old Word docs, Pinterest screenshots, half-finished journal entries titled Redefining Happiness and How to Listen Again. I read some. I shouldn't have. But they felt like post-mortem notes for a marriage no longer breathing. Then I found the folder. It was nested inside a series of generic names: Work 2021, Inspo, Keep This. And there it was. A single video file. Titled, For Me Only. I clicked it. At first, it was just her. Melissa. Sitting in the passenger seat of someone's car. Wind blowing her hair a little. She was smiling. Not the polite smile she gave me when I asked if she was okay. This one was real. Soft. Relaxed. Like she'd stopped pretending for once. Then the camera tilted, and there he was. Quentin. Driving. Sunglasses. One hand on the wheel, the other on her knee. They were laughing. Talking about some inside joke. Something about skipping a meeting, grabbing real food instead of catering. It wasn't scandalous. It wasn't sexual. It was worse. It was intimate in a way that made me feel like I was trespassing. She had filmed it. She had saved it. And she had hidden it. She wanted to remember that moment. I don't know how long I sat there after it ended. My hands didn't move. My legs felt numb. There was no explosion. No rage. Just a slow, sinking realization that I wasn't just the outsider in my marriage. I was the ghost. The person whose absence was never even questioned. Later that night, she texted me. Melissa, I'll come home tomorrow. We need to figure out what this is. What this is. Not what she did. Not what we lost. Just this. Like it was a scheduling issue. I didn't reply. Instead, I copied the video to a thumb drive, then to the same hidden folder where I'd stored the office camera footage and the voice memo from the party. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it yet. I wasn't thinking about revenge, I was thinking about clarity. Because you can't heal from something you still don't understand. And as I sat in the dark, the house too quiet, her wedding ring still catching the last sliver of sunset from the window, I realized something I hadn't dared to say out loud until that moment. She didn't love me anymore. But worse? She probably hadn't for a long time. She walked through the door like nothing had cracked. Hair tied back. Neutral blouse. Black jeans. No makeup, but a practiced calm in her expression, like someone returning from a strategic retreat, not a battle. I stayed seated on the living room couch. Didn't say a word. Just watched her close the door behind her slowly, like she was hoping I'd say something first. I didn't. I wasn't interested in easing her back into comfort. Hey, she said, her voice quiet. I nodded. A single, exhausted nod. She looked around the room like it had changed without her, like the air was heavier and the light colder. It had. Everything was different now. This wasn't a home anymore. It was a crime scene with framed photos still on the walls. I don't want to fight, she said, setting down her bag and standing like a student waiting to be called on. Then don't lie, I replied. My voice came out softer than I intended. Not from peace, from depletion. She hesitated, then moved to sit on the opposite end of the couch. For a moment, we were just two people sitting on fabric, trying to figure out who was supposed to speak next. I made a mistake, she finally said. A stupid one. But it wasn't what you think. It wasn't. She stopped herself, realizing she didn't know how to finish that sentence without detonating it. You mean it wasn't an affair? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because you sat on your boss's lap at a party full of witnesses. You shared a car with him. You filmed it. You kept the video. And I have audio of you saying I'm too soft to handle the truth. So if it wasn't an affair, what was it? Performance art? Her face tightened, and she crossed her arms. I never slept with him. I laughed, not because I believed her, but because she still thought that was the finish line. Like physical contact was the boundary. Like betrayal only counts if there's a hotel receipt or a bedsheet confession. You emotionally left a long time ago, I said. The rest is just paperwork. She stared at me. Her lips parted slightly like she wanted to speak but couldn't find a phrase that didn't make things worse. I felt alone, she finally whispered, and her eyes began to glass over. You stopped noticing me, Leland. You buried yourself in routines. I needed something that made me feel important. I cut in. Wanted. Validated. She blinked. I leaned forward, hands clasped. That's the part you don't get, Melissa. You were all those things. You just stopped being those things with me. And I would have given them to you again if you'd just asked. But instead, you gave those parts of yourself to someone else, and left me here wondering what version of us I've been sleeping next to. There was silence. Real silence this time. The kind that builds a wall between people who once swore they'd never stop talking. She wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. I didn't reach out. I let her sit in it. Then I stood and walked into the hallway. Opened the drawer where I'd left the small black USB drive. Walked back and placed it on the coffee table between us. What is that? She asked. Everything, I said. Everything I know. Everything I've seen. Everything you've tried to hide. Her eyes widened, but she didn't touch it. Melissa, this isn't about punishment. I'm not uploading anything. I'm not blasting it to your firm or your parents. I just want you to sit with what you've done. Without excuses. Without spin. Just, watch it. Then we'll talk. Or not. It's your choice. She didn't speak. Just stared at the drive like it was radioactive. I walked past her and went upstairs. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. But I did sit on the edge of the bed for a long time wondering what kind of man becomes this hollow after trying to love someone who only loved versions of herself. When I came back downstairs an hour later, the USB was gone. But so was Melissa. And this time, she didn't take just her laptop. She took her passport. The silence hit me before the door even fully closed. There's a sound a house makes when someone truly leaves it, not just for groceries, not for space, but for something final. It's not the slam. It's not the absence of footsteps. It's the stillness that comes afterward, like the walls are holding their breath, unsure whether they're abandoned or just forgotten. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, staring at the empty space where Melissa had been barely an hour earlier. The USB drive was gone. Her suitcase, the navy blue one with the scuffed wheel, missing from the closet. Her passport, last I checked, it sat tucked behind a photo of her grandmother in her sock drawer, now gone. She hadn't taken everything. Not yet. But she'd taken enough. My first instinct was panic, followed by guilt, followed by a strange, twisted relief. Because this was movement. For the first time in weeks, things weren't just rotting in place. She was gone, and I wasn't chasing. But what rattled me wasn't that she left. It was what she didn't take. Her journals. Her backup phone. And most telling of all, her work badge. I shouldn't have cared, but I noticed. And it haunted me more than I expected. I spent the next hour moving through the house like I was cleaning up after a flood. Picking up small things, receipts, keys, crumpled notes, all harmless on their own but stacked with meaning now. Every drawer I opened was a coin flip. Would I find something that broke me more? Or just the pathetic remnants of a woman who didn't even think I deserved a clean goodbye? Then, tucked between the pages of an old planner on her desk, I found it. A letter. Folded. Unsealed. My name scribbled across the top. I wish I could say it was dramatic. That it was filled with tear-streaked confessions and devastating truths. But it was worse. It was cold. Precise. Like a company memo sent before a merger. Leland, I'm sorry for how things played out. I don't blame you for what happened at the party, but I also don't forgive you for broadcasting our private business. You've always been a good man. Stable. Kind. But stability doesn't make someone unforgettable. I needed something different. I'm not saying this to hurt you, just to be honest. By the time you read this, I'll be out of state. I don't know where I'll land yet. Please don't follow. I'll be in touch when the dust settles. Take care of yourself. You deserve someone who looks at you the way you looked at me. I just couldn't be that person anymore. M. That last line. That last line. It scraped something raw inside me. I just couldn't be that person anymore. Like she'd tried. Like being my wife had been a costume that finally stopped fitting. I dropped the letter and sat on the floor, back against the cold edge of the wall. I didn't cry. Not out of strength, but because even my tears didn't want to show up for her anymore. I felt used. Abandoned in a quiet, administrative way. Like someone who'd been deleted from a contact list but still kept showing up in old photos. I must have sat there for hours. At some point the sun dipped low and the shadows in the room stretched long. I didn't move. I just let time pass through me like I was furniture. It wasn't until late that night, when I finally stood up to grab a glass of water, that I saw the envelope. It was in the mailbox. No stamp. Hand-delivered. Inside, a printed photo. Melissa. Quinton. Together. Taken with a phone. They were at some coastal rest stop, standing near a rental car. Laughing. He had his arm around her waist like he'd always had the right to it. There was no note attached. Just that single image. It hadn't been taken by me. Someone else had sent it. Someone who wanted me to see. I stared at that photo for a long time, longer than I care to admit. It wasn't anger that flooded me. Not even heartbreak. It was something harder to name. Like grief, but quieter. Like acceptance, but heavier. Someone had captured the image and made sure it landed in my hands. Not out of cruelty, I think, but maybe as closure. Maybe as a way of saying, it's real. You're not crazy. You didn't imagine it. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. I just stood by the window as the hours passed, watching the streetlight flicker on and off, wondering when I had stopped seeing myself in this life. When I had become a placeholder in my own story. By morning, I made a decision, not out of revenge, not to prove a point, but because I was finally tired of being the man waiting to be chosen. I booked a flight to Oregon. No, not to escape. Not to chase her. But to visit my brother, the one I'd been ignoring for years because I was always too busy working on a marriage that only one of us was still in. He didn't ask questions when I called. He just said, "Get here. I'll have a room ready." That trip changed me. I didn't cry on the plane. I didn't send dramatic texts. I didn't post cryptic messages online. I just unplugged. For the first time in years, I let go of trying to fix what had already died. I hiked. I sat by rivers. I journaled until my hand cramped. And somewhere between the pine trees and the freezing water, I stopped looking for answers, and started listening to silence. And in that silence, I remembered something. I'm not just someone's husband. I'm not a victim. I'm not a failure. I'm not weak because I loved someone who didn't love me back the same way. I'm me. Messy. Flawed. Overly sentimental. But finally, free. 2 months later, Melissa emailed me. No apology. Just a vague check-in. Said she was in Nevada. Figuring things out. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because I had nothing left to give her. And that silence, It wasn't a punishment. It was peace. Now, I've moved into a small rental. I planted herbs on the windowsill. I started painting again, badly, but passionately. I'm even talking to someone new. Slowly. Carefully. She knows everything. And she listens when I speak like my words matter. That's a feeling I didn't realize I missed. So if you're watching this, if you're in the middle of your own storm, let me leave you with this. Sometimes, the loss isn't the end. It's the invitation to start again. And if you're lucky, like I was, you'll finally meet the version of yourself that was waiting patiently beneath the wreckage. Thanks for watching this story on Reddit Confessions. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever caught someone in a lie that completely changed your life? Share your experience in the comments below. We'd love to hear your story. And remember, sometimes the truth doesn't break you, it sets you free.